I'll be working as a correctional officer.
They let you in even... Have you had any, like, legal issues?
I straight alcoholic, so luckily it's a little bit easier to hide.
You're joining the dark side, but you're getting paid for it.
Yeah, what did one of the guys from my home group say last night when I announced it? He called me a miserable Nazi Scrooge. I'll be prison guard.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that takes a special kind of person, man. Like, I've been to jail a couple times.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been working treatment.
I guess it's comparable, yeah.
It's very similar. I mean, sick people.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily the nicest people to be around, but...
Yeah. Where are you from?
Originally from Eager, Arizona.
What made you want to come up to Prescott here?
Same as most people. Treatment. Town I'm from is 5,000 people. I didn't want to go to Phoenix or anything like that for treatment, so Prescott was sort of the happy medium. There's treatment centers here, but at the same time, it's not overwhelming for the country bumpkin.
What'd you get into?
So, I am a dyed-in-the-wool alcoholic. Never really played around with any of the other ones, except for Benzo's once. That ended badly. So, it was alcohol.
You probably drank on them.
No, I just did a shit ton of Benzos when I was 18.
Yeah.
So that was fun.
Yeah, those were one of my specialties with Benzos.
Did that when I was 17 and then went hard alcohol and stayed with it for another 10 years.
What made you want to start drinking, just to be cool and fit in?
So I started drinking when I was 17 after my uncle passed away. Kind of committed suicide by cop. He was an alcoholic, and at that point, my family was taking care of his kids. They had a lot of mental issues and difficulties, and so we were hoping that he would pull his head out of his ass before he died. He did not, and so we were stuck with my cousins, which at the time, being 17 years old and not really knowing what I'm doing, and then realizing that my parents were never going to have time for me, it was, okay, well, I got to figure out something to handle all of this, and tried weed, didn't do what I wanted, tried alcohol, blacked out, and that was pretty much how I wanted to deal with life at that point, and so I did.
You just stuck with it and
Yeah.
never got curious for anything else?
Not really.
Yeah.
I never got invited to those kind of parties. I would pregame it, blackout before the party ever started, so I never left my house, and so it's
How old are you now?
I'll be 30 this year.
How long were you drinking for?
Off and on for since 17.
Well, how much clean time do you have?
Right now I've got 2 years, just about. September 13th will be 2 years.
So you went to what treatment center?
It's a place called Silver Sands.
Okay, yeah, we had Anderson on here a little while ago, and he's very insightful. He had a lot of good stuff to talk about.
Yeah, he was a huge part for getting and staying sober. So
when you were at Silver Sands, what did you learn there that made it click for you? Was there a certain time you remember, one day that someone said something that you heard that you're like, it makes sense now? Because you were drinking for upwards of 10 years or so. Was this your first treatment, by the way?
it was first treatment, yeah.
Oh, you're lucky. You're so lucky, dude.
Yes and no. Sort of the key that I learned while in treatment at Silver Sands and then later in AA was that I could be sober and enjoy life. What brought me to treatment had sort of given me the ultimatum of I have to get sober. There's no other option. But learning to have fun in sobriety was a huge part of what helped me stay.
That was the one thing that I realized, that I didn't have to have alcohol or drugs to have a good time. If I was going out, I needed to be drinking in order to feel like I had a good night. It was unimaginable to have a good time without alcohol at least involved. When it got to drugs for me, I just started isolating and staying at home. So how have you been staying sober during COVID?
So the only thing that COVID really changed for me was it put more personal accountability on my recovery. Because before COVID, I could go to a meeting every day, 2 or 3 if I needed, and not have to worry about any of that. There was just pull up my phone, pull up the meeting list, and go. A lot of more phone calls to people that I know in the program, people that are sober. It's a little bit more personal effort to do it, but
Yeah, you're not being shuttled in a van to
Yeah.
meetings like you were in treatment. You get to check in with people that you start to get to know,
yeah.
and build relationships with those people that you go to for home groups or just regular meetings, and so every week you're going to those meetings and then you see these people and they know you're doing all right.
Yeah.
So I'm really missing meetings too, and I've had to find my own alternatives to staying sober. Just feels like it was 50-50 on everyone I knew that was in recovery that actually stayed sober. At least half or more than half have relapsed.
Yeah.
So good for you that you've been able to hang in there.
So I work a lot of AA. I did a lot of service, and part of that meant looking back at the history of AA and hang out with old timers. There were, when AA first started, and there was 2 meetings, one in Akron and one in New York. And so there were people that were getting sober and staying sober for years off of a meeting every 2 weeks or so. For me, it just kind of put it into perspective. It's like, I can stay sober, I just have to do this. I can't rely on other people as much. I've got to read the books, work my steps, call people, go through all the things that all the old timers at meetings always told me to do. Now they become I have to do these things.
No, yeah, you got to take responsibility for yourself. All we relied on every day, responsibility-wise, was keeping our, substance on hand and
Yeah.
making sure that that was regulated to our standards, and having to actually go out and do the work and, follow through on staying committed and staying involved, and it's on you. We're not used to doing that kind of stuff.
The hazards I don't feel like the hazards for me are any more or less than any other time in my sobriety. Pre-COVID, it's just it definitely forced the occurrences faster. So instead of it being I've gotten to a point where I don't think I need meetings, suddenly there are no meetings, and so it's easy to justify things.
And as soon as you start letting stuff slip, it's just gonna keep going. Because that's what happened before. I mean, have you ever tried to stay sober before?
I had done it a few times, yeah, over the years. And
what made you go back to drinking?
I mean, the longest I think I ever had was a few years ago. Tried AA, went to some meetings, dried up for a little bit, didn't work a program, didn't have a sponsor, didn't do the steps, stopped going to meetings, stayed sober for a job. Eventually the job ran out, and so I went right back to what I was doing. There's a lot of stuff that I use. It's all the tools that I learned in probably my first 6 months. Some I've picked up a little bit later, but that first 6 months of sobriety where I stuck around old timers and they told me what I needed to do to stay sober. Things like I look into the book a lot. I study that. I talked to my sponsor. I've worked the steps. I work with sponsees. Basically, it's just a long list because I never know what exactly the day is going to challenge me with. And so I can't be relying on two tools because eventually one of those is going to run out. One of the big things is I got sober because my brother passed away and I knew I had to make it work. I didn't really have an option. And so I took every tool that was available.
Oh, how long ago did your brother pass away?
He would have passed away June 23rd, the same year I got sober, 2018.
Did he have a drinking issue too?
Not really. He was a normie.
Yeah.
He died in a car crash.
So you just know that he would have wanted that for you.
Yeah,
and that was in the incentive right there to get sober.
We got into fights over my drinking. When he passed, my drinking got real bad.
Yeah.
And we ended up using a large chunk from his life insurance to fund my stay in rehab.
Yeah.
And so it's like so he paid to get me sober after he passed away, and now it's on me to keep it.
Sometimes stuff happens in life that we don't understand why, and just that was really impactful for you. And you know, it was that what you would consider your rock bottom.
It was, I kind of used my brother and a couple other friends. We had a little group. They were the like the last safe harbor in my drinking, because I could hang out with them and not really somehow not have to turn to alcohol. And then when he passed away, that group fell apart, and so I was left with just me and my obsession to drink. And
And
it was
no
not pretty.
no one to stop you, no one
Yeah.
to regulate or say like, dude, you think you should get up, you should take a bath for once. You're just isolated in your drinking, and that's where things could have went wrong for you. You could have overdosed or drank yourself to death, man. And thank God that something clicked for you.
When I was 17, I experimented with benzos once, blacked out, drove my siblings to school, completely blacked out. Was not very good at driving blacked out, so got arrested. I don't remember a whole lot of that day, and I know I almost so my sister remembers it better than I do. And I was all over the road. I ran into a couple of things. I wasn't driving very fast, but I managed to get most of them to school. Someone parked behind me, called the cops. Cops came. I don't remember most of this.
Yeah.
They dragged me off, charged me with a bunch of shit. Managed to kind of get off easy because the way that they were doing it was a little bit shady, and so it's a lot easier to garner support from friends and family and judges when the cops are being douchebags and you're sitting there as the 18-year-old looking at charges that involve hefty prison sentences going, I'm not saying I didn't do the things, I just don't necessarily feel that, you holding this for a year until I'm an adult and then throwing me behind bars for 5 years is cool.
Oh, so they tried to wait and
then
to get you with a harsher penalty, charge you as an adult.
Yeah, because aggravated DUI and endangering a minor, both offenses come with, I think in Arizona the mandatory minimum is 5 years.
Because here in Arizona you can't even have a .0001 with alcohol, right? Or else you get a DUI. What's the regulation here again? I thought it was a no tolerance state to where you couldn't have.
It's a no tolerance. Obviously there's going to be certain stipulations that probably won't hold up in court, if it's trace amounts. But with aggravated DUI, that is you are clearly intoxicated and also someone's life is in danger.
So I got into a DUI on Xanax. It was because I was taking so much. I tried to not take any that day, but it was built up in my system to where it just all of a sudden I would kind of click out and click back in and not even know it, because I was living in that sort of parallel reality that it puts you in for so long that I just got used to it. I thought I was wide awake, but I was driving in my truck, and I was coming back from LA to Las Vegas, and I remember just being out in the desert, and I just all of a sudden woke up and the car was accordioned. The truck, I rolled it. I could have ran into somebody in front of me and probably killed them. Had to go to jail for 18 hours, and somehow I got out. But when I got into that accident, I had my prescription bottle with the pills, my Xanax in it, and I remember destroying everything in the car. I had a laptop in there that got destroyed. Everything. I didn't even check myself. I didn't check to see if I was okay. I think I might have tapped like this, but the first thing I did was go back in and secure my pills because I knew the cops were coming. So I tried to make sure everything was good to where I could get it back, and they gave them back to me. So
great idea.
Yeah, they gave them back to me, and then we talk a lot about alcohol and we talk a lot about opiates and meth on here. But I feel like Xanax is probably like one of the worst drugs. So I'm glad that you actually took that advice from yourself from taking those and getting that issue and getting out of it. I know stories about dudes that when I was in jail, they talked about it. Some guy was outside of a Walgreens and was on Xanax. They have footage of him, and he was just tripping out off of the Xanax, and he's sitting there in the corner, and I think some lady walked by him or something, and he saw her and thought she said something in his delusion and pulled out a gun to defend himself and then killed her and then woke up in jail, and they're like, oh, we're charging you for murder, and we have it on camera. And so he's like, I didn't do anything. I didn't shoot anyone. And he believed himself. And he had no recollect of that night or anything. And then all of a sudden it just puts you in these situations where you have no conscience. You go out and do whatever you want to do because you just feel like you're invincible, and you just don't have a conscience about who you hurt, who you steal from. Alcohol goes right there with it, because I know a lot of people, like my grandfather is an alcoholic, and he swears up and down that he didn't do a lot of the stuff that he did to some people in my family.
Yeah.
Like violent stuff, and I never did that, I never said that.
I feel like without alcohol and benzos, with my experience, are very similar. It's just, for me, alcohol, there was less time between blacking out and passing out. And benzos didn't seem to have that pass out stage. And so there's a lot of trouble you can get up to in a blackout, but at least with alcohol, you'll fall down eventually.
Yeah.
Benzos doesn't seem to have that.
Yeah. You probably just didn't take enough, man, because you get addicted to those real quick and just all of a sudden black out, and you don't feel yourself blacking out. It's just, you just go out and then you come back and you don't remember that time between the blackout. You just, all of a sudden you just feel like you just sneezed or something, and you like caught yourself, and then you've been blacked out for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And you could die like that.
I decided that benzos were the problem and I should just stick to alcohol, because that didn't seem to do as much.
They react on the same receptor.
Yeah.
They'll actually give you benzos while you're detoxing off of alcohol, like to help wean you off or whatever. I was mixing opiates with benzos like on a regular basis, and then like drinking too, or whatever I could get. And yeah, for real, like you don't remember anything on benzos. Like it's like an alternate reality. Where'd you get them from?
I think my dad had some anti-anxiety, lorazepam, that's what it is. And I was having panic attacks, so they let me have one. I liked what one did, and so I stole 6 a
You're
couple
like,
days
if
later.
I take all 6 at the same time, then I'll feel 6 times as good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it was.
And then you just woke up from it, and you were like, oh, I probably shouldn't drive blacked out on these anymore, and that's what stopped it for you. It just clicked.
Yeah. So I don't know. The best way to describe the legal side of it was, and part of what allowed my drinking to go on for so long. When I would look at my drinking, I compare it to the list of have you lost a spouse or a job or like your license from DUI or all this stuff. I never checked in the boxes because I hadn't lost any of those things, but I never made the connection of I had never had those things to lose because of my drinking. Like, I lost my license with the Benzo incident, but I didn't get my license or a car until 3 years ago, because I could never afford it, because I could never hold down a good enough job, because I was losing jobs to drinking.
And spending all your money on alcohol.
Yeah, so it's
probably racking up like $100 a night at the bar.
I never made it to the bar. That's high class drinking. Like I was trying to get blackout, and so it was a fifth and just me and myself in my trailer.
Yeah,
so
just trying to get it down, all the cheap pop off. So you didn't have an issue from drinking. Legal wise, so you had an excuse to keep drinking. Mm-hmm. From there, did you have any health issues that happened?
Looking back from what I can guess, I'm pretty sure that every single time I drank should have been a health scare, because when I was 18, I was working like overnights at a Safeway when I was like 19, and that was one of those times where my drinking peaked up, and I didn't make it to the bedroom one night or one morning when I got home from drinking. Was still living with my parents, so they found me passed out on the couch like 8-9 hours later. So it's dark outside, and I was in bad shape. Like, I had pissed myself, like, was not responsive. They took me to the ER, and I think I had a blood alcohol level of like 0.3.
Man.
8 hours later, after I had stopped drinking. And the thing is, I never stopped drinking like that. So
Yeah.
anytime I had hard liquor, it was a health scare. I just wasn't aware.
Yeah.
So.
Oh my god. I've never heard anyone say that they've had a 0.3. I mean, is that a common thing with alcoholics? Is that blood alcohol toxicity level, or?
There's a certain level of pushing it where like 0.5 is, you can't maintain it for very long, and I never tried. Mine was like I would drink for like 1 or 2 days and then stop for a month. You can't maintain it for very long because it'll kill you quick, but you can do it. It's just not healthy.
Oh man, it pissed the couch too. You ever stay on someone's house drunk and piss the couch?
Yeah, this is why I stopped going to another part of the me not going to parties is that if there was hard liquor, I was going to get that drunk regardless. And so inevitably I was going to do something really fucked up. Pissing on their couch was probably low end because I had no control over, I had no idea what I was going to do.
Have you had to make a bunch of amends? Because I had to. I mean,
there were quite a few amends I had to make to friends and family, like the people that for some reason didn't just abandon me, but a lot of the amends I had to make were very much the living amends, because I haven't seen these people for years, and it would be really weird for me to go and dig them up now.
Yeah, but you have sponsors in AA that are gonna tell you like, oh, no matter what, you got to go make the amend. Like, you got to go call them up. Like, I had a sponsor that told me that I needed to call one of my friends that I lived with for, I'd say, about 5 years or so, and I called and didn't answer and left him a message, tried to say, you know, I'm doing much better now, and I'd like to, you know, compensate for whatever happened. And they never called back, so that kind of led me to think, oh, I don't know why I did that. I don't know why I even tried. I shouldn't even try. And why do I have to make amends? Like, no one even cares. No one's going to answer my calls. And then it was just this sort of loathing that happened that set in that almost made it to where I wanted to go use again because of how bad I felt and ashamed. I felt like, oh, if I do this, then it's going to make it better. And sometimes it doesn't.
That's one of the traps I had to, like, avoid. Because a lot of these people that I was trying to make amends, that there's a lot of people that I probably owe amends to, and if I ever see them, I will, but a lot of them I only knew for like a month or so, and didn't keep up contact with. Like, outside of close friends and family, I had cut off most of the world for the last 10 years and had never really had a connection with any of them anyways. And I had to go through and make a lot of amends to the people around me. Like, I had done a shit ton of damage right in my vicinity, so...
What, just getting drunk and just having a rock star party?
So, like, one of the major ones was, there was a lot of people that cared for me pretty, like, seemed to like me well enough when I was not drinking, and I was an important person in their life, and then I would go get drunk like that. And like I said, never stopped drinking to the point where it should have been a health scare. I just wasn't aware. People were aware, and so having friends and family watch me just fucking kill myself.
Yeah.
Sitting there going, oh, I'm only hurting myself, as, you know, all these people have to watch me commit suicide in, like, probably one of the more terrifying ways to do it.
Yeah, because they, I don't know, see you just poisoning yourself to death. I had the same logic, too, when I'd go get drugs and I knew I had a place to do them at, like my apartment, and no one was going to be around that day. I didn't steal from anyone to get it or, you know, do anything to hurt anyone in order to obtain the drugs. I was like, how could I be hurting anyone else if I'm just doing this by myself, and this is like what I need and what I also deserve, because I am so damaged on the inside that nothing will fix me. I can't seem to figure it out, and this is the only thing that makes me feel okay just for the day to get through.
Yeah.
Until it didn't. Until all of a sudden, I needed lethal amounts of Xanax and heroin like every day. I just nothing seemed to work, so it was like either die or get better, and I had to make the decision on I screwed over everyone. I can't believe that I still have family that wants me around, but they forgave me, and you just got to keep working at that stuff.
The way it's put in step 9 is like the make direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Some of the amends that I would have had to go make would have been digging people up from high school or like ex-girlfriends and shit like that. And it was like,
Yeah.
So you remember how I cheated on you in high school? So I'm doing a lot better. I'm really sorry.
But does that stuff affect you in any way to where you'd think that you would end up drinking again over an amends that you haven't made that you've needed to make?
Not to this point. Like, there's still a couple that I haven't had a chance to make, but I kind of went at that one hard when I got to step 8 and 9. Like, 'cause I knew that there was a lot of damage I'd done to... There was a lot of apologies that I owed, and apologizing wasn't a word that meant anything anymore because I'd said it too many times. So I needed to make amends, and I did.
How'd they go?
In general, they went pretty well. Like, there was a lot of... I was still on speaking terms with a lot of my family and friends. Like, I hadn't quite pushed everyone away yet.
Yeah.
And so it was sitting down... It was uncomfortable for me, but they went pretty well. Like, explained what was going on, why I had done the things I had done, and try to explain what I was trying to do now and seeing if there was anything I needed to do to set it right, like going through the whole process. And for the most part, they've gone well.
So you just had to prove to your family that you were actually going to put it in action this time, rather than saying sorry because you kind of ran out of all those. Which is what you had to do. You did. You went out and you did the work, like you said. Like, it takes a lot of work, and people told me when I was trying to get sober for the first time, like, I thought if I just stopped using the drugs that my life would get better, but I had to actually go out and do stuff I didn't think I was going to need to do. And they said, you have a lot of work to do. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, what work? I'm like, if I just stopped using, that's what everyone's mad at me for, then I'll be okay. But the using part is just like the very first chapter of things. If you stop that, there's still so much broken in you that you are going to need to figure out. Like, I think of it as like and it takes time, and people say, how long does it take to get to where you're doing all right? It's like an indefinite amount of time. I think of it as like a weird Rubik's Cube. Just hand someone like a messed up Rubik's Cube, and if you keep working at it, you'll get it, but you don't know how long it's going to take, and it takes a lot longer for other people. You just don't know, but if you keep working at it, you'll get to where you're trying to get to be.
On the note of like the just quitting drinking, because I thought the same thing, like if I could just quit drinking, this would all go away. But one of the things I heard early on in a meeting was if you quit drinking and things get worse, you might be an alcoholic, and AA might have something for you. And that was very much my experience. Is I would quit drinking, and then
things would get worse.
Way worse, because I would go fucking nuts.
Because you had no way to cope or process the issues that were the underlying issues for you.
Yeah, the reasons why I drank, suddenly I wasn't drinking at them, and so they just popped back up.
They weren't going anywhere. Be like a dry drunk, like probably angry or depressed or anxious or what have you. your alcohol was like the Band-Aid for the issue.
Yeah.
And then the trauma. Did you figure out kind of what happened in the past? What'd you feel like when you first took your first drink? How did it make you feel?
The first time I drank, I think what made me like it so much was that I stopped caring that I didn't know how to function in the world. I still didn't know how to interact with anyone, but that was okay because I didn't need to. I had me and my bottle, so fuck them.
It feels like it makes up for what you're lacking when you drink.
Yeah.
Like, I felt very awkward about social situations too. I went to a private school growing up, and then I went to a public high school, and I'm surrounded by a million more kids that I don't know, and you just start to feel like you're out of place. And then I just thought drinking would be cool because everyone else was doing it, so why not? And then I started drinking, and I just remember feeling like totally at ease with everything. I could talk to all of them, and I'm like, well, if I just keep doing this, if I just keep drinking, then then that solves my problem. I was definitely an alcoholic too for probably 17 through 22 years old until I found a better version of alcohol. So would you consider alcohol a drug?
Yeah.
It totally is.
Really, there's a lot of drugs that people don't necessarily. My opinion is if it alters brain chemistry, technically it is a drug. But that's like the scientific
But they make
view.
billboards that have alcohol on it with chicks, you know? Like, what's wrong with that? If you want to be cool, man, you're gonna have to drink, man. That's what our perception was. Like, growing up was alcohol was okay and weed was horrible. I don't like smoking weed. I've never really liked it. I tried to like it, but I don't really care for it. How long were you in Silver Sands, you said?
3 months, so 90 days.
Yeah, that's how, I think 90 days is like the minimum that we need in order to get off on the right foot at least. If you go into treatment or you've been addicted to something for a very long time, and then you go in and you get sober and you're having to figure out how to do things on your own in the real world, 90 days, I think, is about where your brain decides that, oh, this is now became a choice. Like, I can start using again, but I just went this far. I don't think I should. But before that time, I feel like your brain's constantly trying to trick you back into...
Yeah.
It'll find excuses and reasons to weave a way for you to start to go back to it. And that's just, your dependency on it. And that your brain trying to fill that gap. And but after 90 days, I think that it makes it a choice. I mean, you still have pause, which is post-acute withdrawal symptoms.
Like my pattern, the reason why that, when you stop drinking and shit gets worse, you might be an alcoholic, is because I had been living that cycle for the better part of my drinking, because I would get drunk, like really fucking drunk, and then dry up for like as long as I could. So a month, 2 months.
What would trigger you to want to go back after you had a couple of months sober?
The general stress of life. I wasn't working programs or anything like that. It was just sheer willpower, and eventually that ran out. And eventually all of the reasons why I was drinking would just pile up, and I would be left with the option of drink or commit suicide. That was kind of where I would get to.
That's what we were just talking about. It ends up that way. So when did you know that you had a problem?
Pretty early on, like once I started drinking, I never could control how much I was going to drink. If I bought a fifth of alcohol, I was either going to finish the fifth or blackout trying.
Yeah.
And I have drug addicts and alcoholics, both sides of the family. I'm pretty sure that I was just born that way. Mm-hmm. And so the first time I drank was all it took.
The first time I drank with a few friends, we skateboarded over to like a Vons or something, and one of them ran in, grabbed one of those real shitty bottles of the plastic gallon vodkas, and then ran out. I just remember standing there, everyone was trying to pass the ball around and chug it, and I remember I was able to get it down, but all of a sudden my vision started going like black, like tunnel vision. I don't remember anything else, but I just saw one of my friends fall down on the ground, and we tried to pick him up, and we're walking up the street to meet up with one of our friends' moms so she could drive us back to his house. And we pick him up, and he pulls my face down into like a bush, but I was so drunk I didn't feel it. As soon as we got there, I was the least drunk out of the couple of my friends, and his mom was sitting in the front seat and driving. Goes, Kyle, what have you guys been doing? What are you? Have you been drinking? I'm like, no. As soon as I said no, they both puked into their own laps at the same time in the car. And she's like, oh my God, I'm taking you home. I'm like, no, don't tell my mom. And so I get back to my house, and my mom's just screaming and hitting me. And I remember going to the bathroom and puking, and then I looked up into the mirror, and I just had like this Wolverine scratch down my face. And I was drunk slash hungover for like a day and a half after that. Anytime I'd even smell vodka or something that smelled like vodka for like maybe even a year or a couple years after that, my stomach would like tense up. And I'd be like, oh, like I just feel like, because I was puking for like a day or so.
Yeah.
And I thought I'd never go back to drinking. And then I should have took a lesson from when I was 16.
I never had that thought.
Yeah.
Like, my first memory of alcohol was, I think I was like 6 or 7. And my dad was drinking Budweiser. And he let me try it. And there's that whole, parents letting the kid try the alcohol and going like, oh, gross, isn't it? And I'm saying that, and inside my head I'm going like, no, I actually really like that taste.
My dad had O'Douls around, and I would take them, and I saw like the adults drinking alcohol and beer, and I'm like, well, I'm gonna train myself. And I wanted to like it, but it's like drinking coffee or something at the first time you've had it, it's like totally an acquired taste, and all of a sudden it becomes like your favorite thing ever.
I guess I'm just one of those ones. I had already acquired the taste long before I'd ever tried the alcohol.
Yeah, it doesn't taste like high C or, I don't know, something that kids drink. I don't know why we seem to gravitate towards it besides having that in our genetics, being born that way. I had a few surgeries. I went to the dentist, got pain pills, and it just seemed this weird sequential order of how alcohol and things I went through that made me get to pain pills, and then I would come off the pain pills and I'd feel anxiety, so I'd go to the doctor and tell them I had anxiety, so they'd give me benzos.
Oh yeah.
It's just sort of revolving around each other the whole time. But it all started with alcohol, and I think they have always told us that weed was the gateway drug, and I really believe that alcohol is the gateway drug. That's why I asked you if you thought alcohol was a drug or not.
Alcohol was definitely the gateway drug for me. And then I just got stuck on it. Like, the best way I can describe it is, when you find true love, you don't keep dating. I found alcohol, and it was like, well, nah, I don't really need to look around. This is exactly what I want.
But then you have to break up with them eventually, and it was like a bad relationship, like a bad ex-girlfriend, you think about it, but she was your first love. So It's like, I gotta let you go, You were a bitch, but I loved you once.
I mean, the only real advice that I have on getting to meaningful sobriety is getting some kind of program and finding the people that have been doing it for a while and listening to the suggestions they give, because this thing is difficult to do and damn near impossible by yourself. Listen to the people that have gone before you, because they've done it. They know what they're doing. That's the best way to get to that point where you can be sober and be happy, because that is a thing. Because trying to do it by yourself, like, all of my attempts always ended with being sober and being fucking miserable. And this time I'm sober and happy, and that's the key to this. Like, don't be sober and miserable.
Thanks for sharing all the stuff on alcohol, and because we have a lot of people that come on and alcohol wasn't their main thing, but alcohol is like I said, one of the worst drugs.
Yeah.
It's just like drinking gasoline sometimes on your system. Anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. If you have any questions for Josh, go ahead and email me at recovhubpodcast@gmail.com, and I'll get you in touch with him. And feel free to drop in the comments. Anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. See you later.